from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as OTAs for the Broncos. Phase 1 continues. We have Dre'Mont Jones and Pat Surtain speaking with the media. We had a chance to listen to the press conference. Ben, what were some of your takeaways from it?
I think these guys are excited and relate a little bit better to the new coaching staff. I think that this young, energetic coaching staff, I think there was value in having experienced coaching staff last year to kind of guide them. But I think that Dre'Mont is far enough along now that he doesn't need that. And Pat Surtain, I think, is somebody that will, coming into this league incredibly young, connect better with a guy like Ejiro, Evero, and a guy that is going to ask more of him, frankly. This defense is going to ask more of its corners than Vic Fangio's defense was asking. Vic Fangio's defense is complicated, does ask a lot of all its players, and you do have to tackle as a corner. But in terms of coverage, this defense is going to ask a lot more of guys like Pat Surtain and Ronald Darby. And, I think having somebody that is young enough to be able to connect a little bit better on a personal level with those players will help out a lot.
Yeah, I did hear Pat Surtain talking about the energy of Ejiro Evero, and that's the word that's been used a lot for Nathaniel Hackett. I imagine that's going to be the word used a lot for many of these coaches. Mm-hmm. And it's this buzz around the building and the energy around the building. And it's hard not to draw the comparison of what the previous coaching regime was. It doesn't mean it's completely a negative, but I think you're right. I think it might connect with these guys better. And that's another word that gets used a lot.
Yeah, and not that Vic Fangio's not brilliant. He's a brilliant defensive mind. He's been on the league forever. He's seen it all, done it all, et cetera. But I also think that there's a value to in-game energy. And it felt like at times over the last couple of seasons that the Broncos defense, despite being as good as they were, maybe played a little lethargically. You look back and, we got that great documentary with Steve Atwater coming up here in a couple of days. It's going to be on, I think, Channel 7. But you look back and you look at the highlights of that, and you look how fired up all those guys were all the time. And not that the Broncos defense wasn't fired up at times, but it didn't feel the same. And this Broncos defense last year was very good. But it didn't feel the same as it felt watching those defenses, going back and watching them, and not watching them play, not watching their speed of play, watching how they came off the field. That's what I was looking at while I'm watching these clips of, Steve and everything like that. And you just don't see that as much last year. So I'm hoping that you'll see that passion. It reconnects not only with coaches to players, but it reconnects players with their love of the game.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you think that even just the energy from the offensive side of the ball, who's unfortunately been a bit stagnant over the last several years, has not really been able to kind of get out of the basement of the NFL as far as overall scoring and productivity. You have to imagine just even the offense pushing back on the defense. The offensive guys walking around the building with a bunch of swagger. Yeah, you as a defensive player are like, all right, you feeling pretty good about yourself. All right, we'll see what happens. And we've seen that in years past when you had Emmanuel Sanders here and DT and, of course, Peyton Manning. You had guys out there that were going to push on that defense every single day. Well, that made you better on the defensive side of the ball. But, boy, there was, for the Broncos for a long time, the culture of the defense was the offense wasn't allowed to feel good about themselves. Mm-hmm. But the thing about that is that's only so good until you get to Sunday and play an opponent, and you want the offense to feel great about themselves. But the thing about it, you can only do that if you're both matching each other equally as far as talent and aggressiveness.
Well, yeah, and I think that having a defense that does that over the course of the week will make an offense feel better when they're able to move the football, if they're able to move the football.
But the offense getting some wins,
right,
and then going back and forth. We haven't seen a lot of that. Not a lot of the back and forth anyways.
Right. And we've seen the defense dominate and then just continue to dominate and the offense be. And I don't think that's going to be the case with Russell Wilson. I think the detail-oriented approach that he has, I think elevates this offense. I think he's going to get the most out of these guys, and I think he's going to return to form. But I think that there are several components to playing football. You're putting your body on the line. You're putting your physical well-being on the line to play this game, and you have to connect with your love of that game in order to be able to do it. And I think a guy like Russ, who will get down in the weeds on the offensive side, and I think a guy like Ejiro Evero, who just has that kind of that Hackett energy on the defensive side, I think that will help a lot of these young guys and even some of these older guys who may have lost that love and feeling. To quote one of the great cinematic masterpieces, I think that will be invaluable to this team in terms of digging deep when you need to dig deep. And we saw a couple of games last year where the Broncos could have dug deep and they just didn't feel like they did. Things happened at inopportune moments. And they continued to happen in opportune moments. Once, it's a bad break. A bunch of times, it's more than a coincidence. It's who you are. And you look at the Drew Lock with getting stripped in the Cincinnati game, Melvin fumbling against the Chiefs, The Raiders sometimes struggle. Anyway, late game breakdowns like that. And one, once is a coincidence, two is a pattern, three is who you are. And so I'm hoping that their ability to connect, their ability to dig deep and find different things. It's not purely an academic approach. This is going to be an emotional approach. And there is a balance on the blade to that. You can go overboard with the emotional approach, but I think adding that component back into it will help a lot of these guys out. I
think so too. And Dre'Mont Jones, by the way, acknowledging in the press conference as well that he left money out there on the field, but the acknowledgement of there was more I could give, there's more I could do. And I think all players kind of feel that way. Pat Surtain was talking about how he'd like to improve in year two, what he thinks that he can improve on, which is, he wants to be better at film, he wants to be better with consistency, that type of thing. But yeah, I think that one of the things that you do is you self-scout, and then there's acknowledgement of what it is in the moment of how you have to sort of battle through. And I think the energy coming kind of full circle back to it, that's going to help drive you in those moments when things aren't going well, because there are going to be moments where things don't go well, even with all of the raised expectations around the building.
Mm-hmm. And, you go back and you look at the Super Bowl defense, and they had that energy. Wade Phillips kind of, even though he was an old guy, managed to get that energy out of people. Vance Joseph was supposed to be that guy. And when things fell apart, he looked like he was in over his head. We talk about authenticity. I don't think that Nathaniel Hackett and Ejiro Evero are going to be like Vance Joseph, where it's like, when things go wrong. I think they'll find a way. And that's the prep and the pitfall that you have to avoid.
Last couple here. Loved Dre'Mont Jones' answer on Randy Gregory, where he first saw him. He thought he was a wide receiver and how tall he is.
But Randy Gregory was Randy Moss.
Yeah, well, yeah, but Randy Gregory,
the thickest Randy Moss ever.
2 C's on that word. But yeah, that's it's amazing with Randy Gregory, though. He is, prototypical, looks the part of an elite athlete, elite edge rusher. Mm-hmm. We've been talking a ton on Broncos Country Tonight, the radio show, as well as in all the pre-draft stuff. And we'll obviously do more pre-draft here coming up on Broncos Country Tonight, the TV show coming up. But Randy Gregory looks like the traits guy you'd want to draft. And that wasn't the problem coming out of college.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Randy Gregory. He's always been a high traits guy. The problem is that other things have gotten in the way. And with the former CBA, things started to compound. New CBA, not going to be at risk for all that kind of stuff. He's been a rotational guy because of what he's been in. So him stepping into a full-time starter role, which he kind of barely got into last year, it's going to be interesting to see how much he elevates his game and how much of those traits he can tap into and all that. This is one thing to look the part. It's another thing to be the part.
Last one here, Dre'Mont Jones talking about Russell Wilson and finding out about Russell Wilson and the timing of that, because the players didn't really know who was going to be traded the moment it came across the wire on Twitter.
Yeah, that's one of the things you and I, we know about some of these things a little bit early sometimes and have an embargo until the players are told. Well, Espen, I believe it's pronounced.
4 letters.
Yeah, 4 letters. There's 24 Hour Sports Network. It'll never work. I think that, they don't have that such an embargo, so they get the information, they're putting it out there. And so some of these guys found out from TV and the highs and lows of that. Can you imagine working together and going through the valley of the last couple of seasons and looking, all of a sudden you're like, we're getting that piece we've been missing, that elite quarterback, we're getting that. And then finding out you were the piece that was given up to be given that, to acquire that, or your best buddy who you've been lined up side by side with for the last couple of years, who's been a mentor to you, is one of the pieces that you gave up. That can be the highs and the lows of understanding those kinds of transactions in the NFL.
And it's important to note that there's a human element in all of that. Like, I think a lot of times you think, well, professional athletes, you're used to the business of the NFL. I think you can acknowledge multiple things being true. You know the business of the NFL. You know what it's all going to be about in the end. It's transactional. But on the other side of that, you do grow partnerships, friendships with these guys that you work in the trenches, so on and so forth, all the cliches. And yeah, I mean, Shelby Harris is a mentor for Dre'Mont Jones. He's here
for a lot of these guys.
Yeah. Perfect example there.
Yeah, his experience of bouncing around the league and then finally, kind of putting it together a little bit, and coming here and doing that. And his growth under Vic Fangio, I think, was an example for a lot of these guys. So it was, I don't want to use the word devastating, but it was certainly a loss that is felt by those guys.
All right. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.